coolant, a pair of pliers. The radiator, for those who don't know, is this, I suppose you could say, honeycombed. Part at the front here that holds the water in it. And on the back of it, you're going to find this little tab here. Now this is where you're going to use your pliers. You're going to get the pliers on the corner, on the edge of that. You may be able to take it off with your fingers. In this case, I can't. And you're going to undo it. Now this little bit here is supposed to be a hose, but they very rarely work. They can let it out very slowly. Usually you just pull the whole thing off and the water will come gushing out loose. Oh, there we go. See how I do this with my fingers. You can see a little bit of coolant dripping out there. So I'll turn that back up a little bit. Now I'll put something underneath that, a bucket or such, to let it drain into, and then we'll fill it up. Now in this case you don't need to pay attention to how much comes out, because the coolant fills from the top. You'll be able to see when it's at the right level. So we'll get underneath that and we'll drain it out. Underneath that, that'll drain away. And now with oil and coolant you have to dispose of them correctly. I usually use containers that they come in. After you do a few coolant changes you should have some left over, which I have a few, and I just fill them back up. You can put oil and the coolant back, of course, into their own into their original containers if you've got some empty ones, and dispose of them in a rubbish bin. Before I top this up, discuss flushings. I'm doing just what could be considered a basic radiator flush. I'm just dropping the radiator fluid out and topping it up with new stuff. Some people may want to use, you'll find stuff at the shops called radiator flush or radiator cleaner, things like that. I don't use those as a general rule. They're a bit finicky for my liking. They usually require you to put it in with some water, dry for 15 kilometers I think they say, or 5 minutes, and then you drop that stuff out, and then you then put in your coolant. It's supposed to clean all the coolant out of your engine, because there'll be coolant inside the engine. Inside these pipes there'll be bits of coolant inside the engine. Past here, this is I'm pretty sure I've been told this is where the thermostat is. I'm going to change that at some stage. And then passes back through a pipe at the bottom, which I can't see. Actually it's underneath the other pipe. Comes out here. This pipe here. That's for that. So there will be coolant in the engine. But I'm not too worried about the coolant in the engine, because it's not dirty coolant. If you have dirty coolant, you may want to clean it out by using a radiator flush. This is clean coolant. I'll check the coloration in a minute to make sure it is clean. Actually, I'll check that now. So let's see. Yep, there we go, nice and green. Probably too new actually. So I've probably wasted some good coolant. I've actually had the car sitting for a while. That's part of the reason I'm changing it. You don't want to keep old fluids in your car after you've left it sitting. It's good to get clean stuff in there, because when it sits it starts to congeal. Not so much with coolant, but I'm just giving it a bit of a run through with some new stuff, and making sure that it's good. Some people will say, okay, well, if there's coolant in my engine, is that mixing coolants? It technically is. Technically it is. But unless you've got red coolant in there and you're using green coolant, I wouldn't worry about it too much. If I've dropped green coolant, it's more than likely the same coolant that was used by the mechanic shop. And it will be such a small trace anyway, a very minimal trace of coolant in there. And you really don't have very much gets left inside, not as much as some people seem to think. So we'll top that back up. What we're going to do is I'm going to put the coolant in. Now you've got a full ball of coolant. It's very common mentally to pour it like cordial. So you're going to get the coolant and you're going to go like that. Very quickly reaches the top. If you turn the coolant to the side and go from the side, you'll find that it takes longer to get to the top, and you'll be closer to the flange when you have to do it. Now that round bit there is called the flange, and you're going to fill that up. So we'll fill that up now. You're usually going to spill a bit. You can always use a funnel. Don't use the same funnels you did for your oil. Oil gets very hot. It stays hot, stays warm. Coolant you want to stay cool. Putting oil and coolant, mixing them together is a really bad thing. In both directions. Water in your engine, coolant in your engine is as bad as putting oil in your coolant. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting some of this water, waiting for bubbles to get out of the radiator. I'll top up the overflow. Now I don't have markings on my overflow anymore, so I just put it to a sort of, half fill it. Now you will have to carry your radiator water with you. And after you've driven it, you'll probably find that you'll look at your coolant, not when it's hot of course, never open up your coolant when it's hot, or you'll end up burning yourself horribly, more than likely. Put that on top, I've overfilled it a little bit so there'll be some coolant runoff. Press that in. Now after I've driven it, it should push the coolant around into the engine and the light, and the engine will have lost some of the coolant out of it, hopefully all, if you're really, really lucky. But what will happen is as you drive, the coolant will heat up and will circulate, and if there's any air bubbles which can appear in your radiator and the like, then they will mean that the level of the coolant will go down. So you keep your coolant in your car, and then when you finish driving, so you've gone out somewhere, come back, after a couple of hours, come out. Now if you want to see if it's too hot to open, as I said, there's a pipe down the bottom coming off the engine. You don't grab it near the engine. The engine's going to be hot on its own. You're going to put your hand down. This is all going to be hot. If it's been a couple of hours, it shouldn't be too hot, so be careful about burning yourself. And you're going to grab the pipe at the bottom. And if the pipe is really hot, don't open up the top. If the pipe isn't hot, if it's cool, then it means that the water isn't too hot, and you should very, very slowly, as an example, you'll feel it loosen. Now if it's pushing, even when it should be not, you see here it's like it's a bit wobbly. If it doesn't get wobbly at that stage, do not progress. You'll see if it is hot, there'll be steam, there'll be coolant pouring out the side. Try and tighten it back up. This metal will stay hot for a long time. If this is boiling, then don't touch it. If it's just warm, it can trick you. This can get cool in comparison, because the water at the top is not as hot. Even though I know heat rises, but the water isn't pushing against it as much. It's not getting as hot. And then but if you feel that bottom pipe, then you'll know that it's too hot. And you can open it up, have a look. There we go. See, that's full. There isn't, no air bubbles have come up yet. And you do that. So that concludes our change.